I was trying to think about whether to call this education reform, or education revolution.
Revolution.
Revolution, because you ain't about any reform.
I'm not a reformer.
What do you mean by that?
Educating parents around getting in front of the education conversation, getting them back in the decision-making table. That's not reform.
And it's so basic, right? Like
Okay. Yeah.
And I think about like revolution. Like people think you're talking about like crazy things,
They
and
do.
it's like the most basic of things.
Like kids can read.
Kids. You know what? A kid can get online at home or anywhere in the city.
Yep.
And do their homework or access resources online. That's actually revolutionary.
And know how to use it. They call it revolutionary.
Right? And it's sad.
Yeah, it makes me want to cry.
Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Krystal Barnett. I run Bridge to Hope St. Louis, organization for parents led by parents. We believe that they, one, should be in that education conversation. Two, they need to know how to advocate for their children with enough knowledge and power. And three, it's just time for us to take it back over.
How long have you been in St. Louis?
My entire life, 39 years.
And where did you, I mean, it's the St. Louis question. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Ladue because I was a DSED kid, but I grew up on the north side of 21st Ward.
Got it. So, can you tell us a little bit more about Bridge to Hope?
Yes, so Bridge to Hope, I consider it a power building space. It's a space where we teach parents how to get back in there and champion for their kids. We also teach them about education landscape, understanding politics, understanding how your elected officials are supposed to work for you, and then how to put a demand of accountability on the district that's failing their kids.
Okay, great. And why do you do it?
My kids were in private schools, and what I saw in those private schools was a real community. When I had my accident and I was down for 6 months, they came to my house in the city from West County every day, all 6 months I was down. I had never seen that before. When my son started struggling, instead of them like sending me off to find a resource, they brought the resource to the space. And I started thinking to myself, why don't our schools do this? Or what's blocking us from doing it? And what I learned is that parents out there, when my kid went to school, they're very informed. So they know how to get stuff when they need it. And the parents in the city don't know what they don't know. So it's hard to move and get stuff done.
So I'm thinking it's great if you have people who can advocate for and push for it to happen.
Yeah.
I have my own ideas, but why is it that it's not already done? Like why is it that the resources or the access or the care, really, it seems, is not given to kids in the city?
I think it's established among the racist system. I think it's systemic oppression. I also think that there's a heavy fear that when our children get educated the same way other children naturally get it, what that dynamic will then shift to. It's not to say that the people in that space don't necessarily care about kids, but they don't hold them to the same standards or the same requirements. They don't push them to the same level of greatness. One, because they don't believe we can, and two, because they might be afraid if we reach it.
And so when you say they came to your house, so what were they doing coming to?
They brought food to our house. A man came down. He's like a millionaire. He was going to build a ramp because I was non-weight bearing for 6 months. And that was all for free. All because my child was in that community. Not because I was anybody special or they had a personal relationship with me. Majority of those people that came to my home were people I had never met. But they heard the need and they feel the need. Why are we not doing that in the city? The one thing I hear them say a lot is we don't have resource. It's not that we don't have resource. Our district gets almost $400 million a year. 76% of those dollars come from local funding. So it's a waste. What are we doing with the resource that we get? Why are we not building proper programming, bringing in right curriculum, shrinking down those class sizes, paying our teachers better? We're not doing it. But then we expect for children to thrive, and then when they don't, they blame parents. That's just how it works, because they'll tell you learning starts at home.
And so how would you describe the current state of education in St. Louis?
If you are poor, if you're in the city, your education probably sucks. If you can't afford to move around, get in a good school district, pay for school, something like that, it probably sucks. And that's charter and pub district, traditional public. They suck across the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then let's make a real like a real dent in this. If the school is predominantly black, it's probably failing. And that speaks to the racism side of the education in St. Louis. And Missouri, because let's keep in mind that 50% of kids can't read on level. That includes rural areas, that includes far out counties, and St. Louis City and Kansas City. So, like, yeah, it's nuts.
And so, what do you think is needed to address the needs to? I mean, because when I look at some of the proficiency scores in some of these schools, you're talking about 3%.
Yep.
About 5%.
We had a negative percent. How do you even get that? Okay.
So what do we need to do as a parent, as an organizer, as a resident of St. Louis? What do we need to do?
I'm gonna stop saying we have to work together. We all have to decide that academic outcomes is a priority, and then work backwards for how do we get to academic outcomes. And I don't think our city is ready to do that. Like this past time when they talked about no more new schools, they think that new schools and choice and things of that nature play a role in academic outcomes. It doesn't. If your schools were doing well, nobody would leave them. They would be flooding, beating the door down to get there.
About half the kids now are in charter schools and half in
traditional public. And that's based on parent choice. It has nothing to do with the district or what the district wants people to decide. But if your school was bringing in reading specialists the way they need to, running special needs the way they needed to, had smaller class sizes, supported their educators, because I've learned from educators they're not being supported, and we had shown leadership who was pushing for academic outcomes, I think we would get them. But they're not doing that. There's a lot of finger pointing, what is it called? Not scapegoat. Yeah, scapegoating. And then we, year after year after year, we still talking about the same stuff like literacy, and it makes no sense.
And what boils my blood is when I hear about the moratorium. It's like, listen, what are you doing to help kids read? What are you doing to help kids write? What are you doing to help kids be able to count? And you're voting on a moratorium?
We are.
That's your plan?
That's the plan.
And just that in and of itself, to me, speaks volumes.
It does.
Of the lack of care. Because you have no plan. But you know what? Asher with Ali Academy has a plan, but no, we don't want to.
We're not talking to Asher right now.
And we not only don't we want to talk to him, but we want to make sure he doesn't execute his plan. I'm gonna continue to sit here without a plan for tens of thousands of primarily black
children
and poor children.
Yep.
And somehow you sleep at night.
Yeah.
I can't talk about it too much because you want to start flipping tables.
Kind of.
It's ridiculous.
But if you listen to the narrative, it's if you don't want to do it our way, if you don't want to support this initiative, then we're not inviting you to the table of a citywide plan. That's the very thing that we've been talking about. The divisive nature in our city is why we don't have well-working schools across the board for St. Louis children, because it has to be your way, and it has to be this person way and that person way. There is a thing that we can do that'll bring everybody together, where we say this is the standard across the board that every school should meet. This is what we should be pushing for in every classroom for each child to attain. These are the supports we're going to put in place for them to get there. This is the help that we're going to provide from the community, people like Bridge to Hope, folks like We Power, people that are doing community work, working right in lockstep with school folks and with parents. Now look what the outcome could be. But it's not about that, though.
It's not about kids.
No, because if you listen to the conversation they have, it's about buildings. It's about money. It's about historical landscapes. It's about neighborhoods. It's about everything except the folks that make up those things. Like, who cares about a historical landscape that nobody visits? Who cares about a neighborhood that nobody lives in? Who cares about a school that's failing kids? Nobody. So it's the people that make those things valuable. If we was investing all that energy into the children, the way they invest into the nonsense, our kids will be soaring off the map. Both, let's talk about it socially, emotionally, and academically, because that's important as well.
Let me switch gears a little. With Bridge to Hope,
Yeah.
about how many jobs do you have open right now?
I have 4 part-time organizing positions open. I have an operations director open, a parent case manager open, and one more on my leadership team open.
Okay. And what's the salary range for those jobs?
Nobody working for us unless you're part-time makes less than 40,000. So depending on skill set and then knowledge base and then passion depends on, where you land there.
So, what specific skills are you looking for?
One, you have to be knowledgeable of St. Louis and the St. Louis landscape. You need to care about the people we work with. You cannot have a prejudged or terrible disposition when it comes to the people that we serve. A second thing, you have to be committed to the mission and vision of Bridge to Hope. And we'll only see that based on the way we kind of vet people. Like, are you willing to come to actions? Are you willing to phone bank? Our work is organizing work. It's not sit behind desk and number crunching type stuff. You have to be willing to get your feet dirty, get out here and talk to people. And that's everybody in Bridge to Hope, from the ED down to a part-time person. Each and every one of us are organizers. So I would say the number one skill you have to have is that you have to have the heart to want to organize and gather with people in community.
When you say, like, let me take one example. You said that, like, operations director.
Yes.
What types of things would they have to do?
Run all of our systems, like the system we use to manage all of our data. Keep up with stuff like our billing, things we do with payroll.
So with that, what math skills do they need?
You gotta know algebra. So okay, like saying to use basic math won't be enough because we do a lot of multiplication, dividing. We do a lot of that kind of stuff. You gotta have mastered some stuff.
What about literacy skills?
You most certainly have to know how to read. Like, that's the bottom line. We do a lot of reading.
And so, for me, when I hear our schools have like 3% proficiency rates
Yeah.
in math and reading, to me, it's not like some anomalous, just amorphous number out there. It translates because you have jobs open.
Yes.
And not only am I thinking about the children who won't be able to get those jobs, but even their parents
Yep.
who currently can't get those jobs
Yep.
because they just lack the basic literacy and math skills. And sadly, from the same failing schools
That their kids are in. Yep.
it's the same failing schools that are precluding them, that are blocking them from now getting jobs. And you said minimum 40,000.
Minimum.
What's the range? What's the highest
Between
range?
40 and 60.
60,000. I mean, think about what $60,000 could do for some families.
It could change their lives for some families.
But we're in an educational system that you don't have necessarily the people to fill those currently.
And even if people have the skill, they don't have like the passion for the work we do, which also shuts them out of the space. Access and opportunity is created from many different ways, but it starts with those basics that you named. If you can't read, if you can't add, if you can't do,
You're not even a candidate.
yeah, like no disrespect to anyone, but it's nothing that we can really do there. One, because that level of basics is just required to do even the bare minimum.
And so, I mean, that just makes me think, if this is the basics, just to even like, and put your foot in the door, just put your what's the phrase? Put your thing in the hat, right?
Yeah.
Just to put your name in the ring. And you can't even do that because of your, like, what are your options? Like, what are you like? What's your life options as a parent, as a child, thinking, dreaming about the future? What are your options, or what doors are now closed to you because your school, not because of you,
Not
but
because of
because
you.
your school was okay, and your school system was okay with one that provided proficiency for about 20% of the kids, and that's both traditional public charter
And
and
charter schools.
charter
Yep.
public schools, and said it was okay for 80% of those children not to have the basic skills. It's people talk about racism as if it's something of the past, as if it's something like you have to study like deeply. I'm like, to me, it's just so plainly clear
It is.
when you look at who's in the public school system in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Mostly black kids. I think about 80% black kids.
Yep.
And you look at the lack of proficiency, right? It's also the failure rate is also about 80%, right? Because you only have about 20% at proficiency,
Right.
and so you don't have to make some wild connections. Talk about what modern day systemic race deep and impactful and hurtful racism looks like. Like, I think it's our educational system.
Yes. And it's not hidden.
Right?
So I think the way they talk about the failure of kids and where they try to place blame is where I get furious. Like, if you think about it, any adults in the realm of a child, our responsibility is to make sure that child is supported and loved, protected. That's in schools, that's at home, that's wherever kids are. The fact that we're still finger pointing and we haven't all just pointed that finger at ourselves and said we all just need to do something different
Yeah.
is beyond my comprehension.
That's why when I heard that, Dr. Adams was part of the conversations, right, citywide plan, and then the board told him he couldn't participate anymore and they wanted to stop. It's like, here you have an effort to bring people together because you realize that the schools are, not only are the schools failing, they have been failing for decades.
Yes.
They've been failing literally generations.
Yes.
And then you have an effort, and because someone wasn't in the know,
you shut the superintendent of the district out of the conversation, and now you're going to shut anybody out of the conversation who doesn't support moratorium.
And again, you don't have a plan, and not only that, you failed for years, for decades, and now you have who gave you the authority to now start talking about who should even be able to be part of this conversation?
They gave themselves the authority, because they're going to spin around and say, we came up with this plan, all these so-called organizations and school leaders backed out because they didn't want to support moratorium, and because of that, where are they now? And I'm going to just throw it back at them to say, what is a citywide plan without talking to the people that's closest to the problem and including them in the process? What is a citywide plan where you put such a requirement like supporting moratorium in something so serious? You're building a plan across all the schools, not just St. Louis public schools. So why would you not have other people at that table of which this plan is going to affect? And let's just be clear that you all are talking about a plan that you haven't even written down, that you haven't even started on. You're talking about going back to listening sessions. And the truth is, we did listening sessions all last year. Why didn't you go from that data instead of recreating the wheel to move this ball along? And in the meantime, kids are still failing because there's no academic recovery plan as well, which is what we should have been talking about. Not moratorium on schools.
A lot of people hate Kanye.
They do.
Talk about Kanye. The one reason why I will always give Kanye my respect.
Why?
When he was on national television and what was happening in New Orleans, and he looked at the camera in front of everyone and said, George Bush doesn't care about black people. Because what was happening was clear. And he was one of the few people who would stand up and say it. And when we look at St. Louis and we look at the history, how can we say our elected officials, well, most of them, how can we say this system of governance, this system of education cares about black people? It doesn't. Like, just numerically, statistically, objectively, St. Louis doesn't care about black people.
I never thought about that.
And so it's like now, how do we really start to include? Right? Because when I say St. Louis, I'm talking about the people who quote unquote power,
yes.
Right? That they haven't shown to care about black people. Right? We have a new administration here with Mayor Tashara Jones. I'm hoping, right?
Yes.
Maybe she does, right? And I'm hoping she does.
She seems to care.
She seems to care.
Yeah.
And so now let's actually, I want her to use her weight, right? Use her power to push and say, we're going to start caring about black, and let me show you.
Yes, in a tangible way.
In real impactful ways.
I think people care about black people in theory. Like, they like to talk about diversity and inclusion. They like to talk about equity. They like to talk about community and families and this and that. But that's all theory based.
Yeah.
Until it comes to I'm not going to even use money. Where's the demand for outcome from the yield on the return? Like, we have reading specialists in this school, but we should see kids moving a grade level by X date. We have this amount of math tutors going on. We should see kids moving in math by this. Like, there's no definites in these promises that they provide. It's all up in the sky. You're going to see it one day. Maybe not. That kind of stuff.
Reading is and I can observe. It's like a real thing. It's like as real as grass and the air.
As real as this
and
cover.
the sky, right. It's like I can watch a kid. Can you read or not? After you read, do you understand what you read? And it's basic. But this basic type of education, like we said, in this system, man, that's revolutionary, man.
And it's like, what?
Wow.
And I don't think it's that kids can't read.
No.
I think it's that kids aren't being taught to read.
No, and some kids aren't expected to read. And
yes, that's a thing that's like allowed somehow. Would they try?
Yeah.
I have no doubt the child tried. I'm talking about the folks that's supposed to be supporting the child.
And Mark, he has some issues at home, and so that you have factored in, and so he can't. We can't put too much on him.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so me coming out the school districts I was in, they had broken homes. They had crackheads. They had alcoholics. They had. Maybe their lights was cut off, even out there in Clayton. But their child could read. Their kids could do math. Their kids was in programs and speaking languages. That's not a thing. It only becomes a thing when they're talking about black children. Poverty and trauma and struggles and all of that only is a thing when it comes to us. It's not a thing in no other culture. And I'm tired of it. A child from coming out of a broken home, let's talk about it. It doesn't stop his capacity to learn unless we stop it. If when you see that child, all you see is what his past or present may be and not where his future is, that's why you don't push him towards that future.
Exactly. Yep. It's like, listen, we can be considerate about the struggles kids go through and try to provide support.
Absolutely.
And you have to read.
Okay.
And you have to be able to do math. And you have to be able to get a job one day. And you can still be successful. And I still believe in you. That all of those ands are left out.
Yes, because it stopped right when they're a single parent household. It stopped when they have a drug addict parent. It stopped when maybe they're being abused. Now here's the thing. If you was that aware that child was being harmed, what have you done to get that child out of a harmful situation? Are you piling them at school and giving them extra food in their bag? but you're not pushing them to prepare themselves to get out of that situation one day. Like, what are we really doing? Because if we're not preparing that child to be self-sufficient, even if his parents aren't, then we are causing the same level of harm that the parents are.
And to your point, either like we need to see results. And so either there are two choices. Either we start seeing results, or there are people in the street and there are voices being given advocating for the things that are stopping us from getting those results. And right now we're not getting the results. And it's not like I see SLPS or even most charter schools saying we need more funds so we can provide this. There's just no results, and it's just kind of quiet about the failure of our schools. Because again, it's not about the failure of our children, about the failure of the schools.
It's the system, not the kids.
Yep. Well, thank you, Krystal. I really appreciate this first session or installment of Revolutionary Education.
Yes, I like the name.
Education Revolution. We're still working on it. We'll see what we end up with, but I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.